Hi there,
Hello.
Alfred.
Hi there. I'm Alfred Lambremont Weber, and I'm with Suzanne Hansen, who's uh, to us today. Suzanne, I was wondering, could you lower the light at your end because all of a sudden
Lois.
you've become very bright.
Yeah, unfortunately, Alfred, I think that might be the atmospheric conditions here.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if we can actually fix that.
Oh, okay, fine.
Ha-
Well, good.
What did you suggest?
Yeah, yeah.
What did
Let's
you?
just go with it.
Okay.
Um, and I'm with Suzanne Hansen, who is the founder and director of UFO Focus New Zealand, and she's had over 35 years of research in the UFO field. Welcome.
Thank you, Alfred.
Well,
Yes, I've had a lot of experience in the field in New Zealand, and have worked with a number of veteran UFO researchers here, both in the area of sightings and in contact as well.
excellent. Now, um, we this past summer, in July to be precise, I attended a conference. In fact, we were both speakers there with a mutual colleague of ours, Mary Rodwell, and she
Hmm.
presented uh, an extraordinary case and experience that she had had with you, and that case and experience was very striking to me. It really opened my perception uh, on a number of levels, both as to, oh, I would say there's so many levels, I can't count them. And so I will just let you tell your story and then maybe come in once in a while and ask for clarification. But basically, as I understand it, just to summarize it here very briefly, at a young age, perhaps 8 years old, you were taken up into a gray extraterrestrial craft and there introduced to someone that was told to you would be very important to you, and that person was in the form then of a ball of light. And in a subsequent visit, uh, I'll I'll let you go on from there. So why don't we just start the story at the beginning because it's just so extraordinary.
Okay, well, right throughout my life, I'd had a lot of strange and unusual experiences happen, and I'd also had UFO sightings with my family. So this whole subject was quite familiar to me, and it was something I wasn't afraid of. Um, as I got older, I began to have flashbacks of contact with extraterrestrials, and I won't go too deeply into that, but I'll move on to the actual incidents you're talking about. Um, in a Mary and I decided at several years ago to do some regression on some of my memories to try to fill in some of the gaps and to actually see what took place in a fuller aspect of some of these experiences. On this occasion, I was taken on board craft as an 8-year-old child in my summer pajamas, and the regression began with me actually being in a very large white room, white walls with a white, warm, marble-like floor. And there were a whole variety of other children there. So there were several human children along with myself, but there were also species of greys and mixtures of species, what you might call also transgenic children. Uh, we were there to learn to communicate with each other, and this was all done through the mind, not verbally. And obviously, we had been doing this from a very early age because during another regression, Mary actually took me back to when I was 6 months old and on board craft. So on this occasion, we were learning to communicate through playing games with the mind. So we could actually create, and this is quite hard for me to get my head around, but we were actually creating holograms in the air, which we would play with as children would play with physical toys. So that was a very interesting point, and I remember commenting on the colour of them, how bright and luminescent and complex the shapes were that we were creating. I was approached by one of the Greys who asked me if I would like to meet another child. Said that I would, and I sensed through my communication with him that he was actually holding something back. There was something he wasn't conveying to me. Now, how I sensed that, I'm not too sure, whether it was just something that I was able to pick up through many years of communicating with them, throughout my life since a baby. Anyway, I was taken along a corridor to a much smaller room where we waited side by side, and I was able to perceive that he was communicating with other Greys somewhere else on board the craft, because I pick up snippets of his mental conversations, shall we say. After a short while, 2 Greys appeared through the doorway, and between them, at around about their head level, was a very vibrant, glowing ball of blue light, roughly the size of a soccer ball, a little bit smaller than that. Upon seeing this light, I instantly became quite emotional and confused in my child's mind, because I recognized something about this light that I loved. And as a child, I had no explanation for this. I had no explanation for how I could feel this instant relationship and rapport and love of a blue ball of light that I had no recollection of having seen before. The Grey actually at this point asked me to look into his eyes, and he projected conveyed 3 streams of information to me. The first was just a simple one that this is a friend we want you to get to know, and we would like you to communicate with. Following this was a much deeper stream of information that conveyed to me the full future life of this child, and this conveyed at lightning speed. So my mind was filled with images and pictures and snippets of conversation, as if there was information fast forwarding into my brain, and I was only registering very small pieces of it here and there. However, it was sufficient to engender in me quite a bit of confusion. I became tearful, I became concerned, and once again he then inserted the 3rd level, which was simply, you will come to love this child, this soul will be your son one day, you will marry, you'll grow up and marry, and one day you'll have children, and one of these children will be inhabited by this soul. He referred to the blue ball of light as a source, point of energy. So he then just me down to the point where all I had in my mind at that point was, I'm going to be allowed to play with this ball. They were going to leave us alone for a short while in this room to see, obviously, how we would react to each other. At this point, they all exited the room and left me there. I tried to engage the ball in some kind of rapport, so I actually wasn't sure what to do. It was like, well, how do I make this work? What do I do with this ball? So I actually, as a child would do, I asked it if it could bounce, and it didn't move, it just hung in the air. So I got a little bored at that stage, and in the regression I described, I decided I would do cartwheels on the floor for a minute or so. And then I sat down against the wall, feeling somewhat disappointed that I was not getting any reaction out of this ball. And at that point, I suddenly felt as if I was being watched, and as if communication began. So in the same way that I can telepathically communicate with the extraterrestrials, this ball of light communicated with me in the same way. So we played together for a while. It zoomed around the room with me chasing it. So we did a few of the normal things that a kid would try to do with a ball. And then very soon after that, the Greys came back, conveyed to me that they were very pleased with the way our meeting had gone, and told me that on future visits on board craft for right up to adulthood, I would continue to meet with this ball of light, learn with it, and become very, very close with it. And I was told that I'd actually known this soul, this ball of light, since long before my incarnation in this life as Suzanne Hansen. The two Greys that had come in with the ball of light then took it away, and I was escorted by the third Grey back to the room where the children were relaxing and playing and communicating. I was there in those circumstances for a while, and then we were told that we would be returned to our homes, and we were asked to follow the Grey down the corridor. At this point, as I went past each doorway, I jumped and hopped and looked in an attempt to see this ball that I felt such an affinity with yet again on that occasion, and that's where the regression finished.
Right. Now, so what happened between that time and the next time that you would encounter the ball, or?
Well, in my own life, in terms of my experiences on board craft, I had no memory of meeting with this ball of light. It was obviously something that was done, and I did not recall it. So this activity was going on board.
Okay, I'm awfully sorry for the interrupted, but you were talking about the period between your introduction and then later in life when you went up again in the craft.
Well, I think throughout my life, up until the time that I had the soul of my son enter my body as a young adult, up until that time, I guess I became very familiar with the soul state in that right from early childhood, I had the ability to communicate with people who've passed on from this life. So I guess in a sense this whole area of the soul and reincarnation and life after life, shall we say, was quite familiar to me, and I gained a lot of experience in that area right up until the time that this particular soul entered the body of my son.
Right. Now, Mary has described how you were married, and then there was at a certain point during your pregnancy that you were taken on board the craft, and I wondered if you could take up the story there and just tell us at what point that happened and what occurred then.
Right. Well, during the mid to latter of my pregnancy, I was taken on board craft, and I was escorted down a long corridor by two beings that I recognized immediately, not by their looks, because the greys and species of greys look quite but I recognise them more by their emanation, their energy, their output. So they escorted me, was very heavily and conscious and not too good about myself in the latter stage of pregnancy, looking forward to the birth. And I had also been very unwell throughout the pregnancy. I'd actually had hypoglycemia and high blood pressure, so there was some concern from them about my physical state. I was taken into a small room where there was quite a lot of equipment, a console against the wall, and unfamiliar medical equipment, we say. And I was helped with a pedestal foot underneath it, and I was told that another grey was joining us shortly. He eventually came into the room, and he was much shorter than them and looked more like your traditional grey, if I can put it that way. The others had a slightly different appearance about them. He told me that they were going to perform what he called a merging procedure, where something was going to merge with my body. My initial reaction to that was a little bit cautious, asking what was going to take place. And he said that first he needed to retrieve a memory that they had, memories that they had embedded in my subconscious over the years. And if he did this first, then I would understand what the procedure was about, and it may allay some of my concerns or anxieties. So he placed one hand over my forehead, and I immediately began to see images and pictures, snippets of information, that same kind of thing where memory is drawn out into your consciousness. And these were all memories of communicating as a child right up through childhood and teenage years and into adulthood, communicating with this blue ball of light, playing with it, spending time with it, talking with it on board craft. And this immense feeling of love welled up inside of me, and I became very tearful as I remembered what had been taking place with this soul on board the craft all of these years. And at this point, he then said that he would need to lower my metabolism in order for this soul to be able to enter my body. And the reason given to me for this was that this soul had been enhanced, it had been altered in some way by them, and therefore its energy or its energetic signature was much more powerful and could create shock to my body if the procedure was not handled in a specific way. At this point, we were joined in the room, in the doorway, and spilling into the doorway by around about 16 or 18 very small greys, children, and the air, shall we say, was completely filled with telepathic chatter. So it was just like listening to a class load of kids talking. They were all chattering at once, but it was all done with the mind through telepathic conveyance. And I was told by the grey that these children, they were watchers. In other words, they were going to be, they had already been growing up on board craft with this ball of light and communicating with him. And these particular entities were going to be associated with him right throughout his life. So they would be in a protective capacity. They would also be working with him throughout his life with the different tasks and specific things that he needs to do in this lifetime. So my metabolism was lowered, Alfred, rather like, if I can put it this way, like a yogi is able to lower their metabolism so that they're barely breathing and the temperature, bodily temperature, drops. So in the regression, I recall my body becoming very cold. Mary noticed that I'd become very cold and put two big rugs over me. And my voice became very slurred and slow and quiet until I was barely getting words out at all. And while this was happening, the blue light, the blue ball of light began to enter my body. At that point, I felt as if my whole body had been infused with light, and I cannot even begin to describe how that felt. It was a very wondrous feeling as that soul entered my body and into the body of my unborn son. Following that, he raised my metabolism again so that my body warmed, and I felt quite normal, and I was given quite a lot of information about how this child eventually would be educated, would receive a human education down here on the planet, but the child would also receive an education on board craft, and this would actually be separate from the continuing work and education with the soul that inhabited the child. So the soul that inhabited the child would go on board in its blue ball of light or soul state and receive specific education and instruction, and then the child would also be taken on as a human child. So there's this definite distinction, which I'm still getting my head around, of the child's education and the soul's education that inhabits the child. Very, very specific difference between the two. And I was told that the job of this child in his life was to meld the two together, to be able to access the education and wisdom from both of those educations and to be able to use them fully in the work that he has ahead of him on the planet. And it was made quite clear to me that his work would be for the benefit of mankind, that he would reach certain levels of, shall we say, power in the career that he would choose, but that he would use that power with integrity and compassion and honesty, and that there were thousands of children being educated in the same way by the extraterrestrials, and the intention was an upliftment and an expansion of consciousness, technology, sociology, spiritual aspects on our planet, to be given this oomph, this big upliftment and movement and evolution by these particular children growing into adulthood.
Very, very amazing. Now, just to ask you, and if this at all is a private question, well, just let us know. But is your son aware of any of this at this time?
Sorry, you cut out and I missed the first part of your sentence.
Is your son aware of what you have just shared with us?
He is not. He has no memory at all of being on board craft, and I have been told that to protect him up until the time when this will come into his consciousness, which will be, I was told, in his early to mid-30s. And he's 27 now, so he hasn't got too far to go. But no, he has no conscious memory of this. However, I have discussed all of this with him, and he feels quite comfortable with it. But once again, he as a child has been a child who's had been able to communicate with spirit. He has psychic ability. He has precognition. He is interested in healing. So there's a whole raft of things that are very common to children of this kind that he has an interest in and like an inherent understanding of.
Right. Now, just to ask you, these are realms that in the traditional sense have belonged to, quote, the spiritual domain and to divine or angelic beings dealing with the soul. And there's a certain stereotype in the culture here about the Greys. And I'm wondering if you could explain to us how you think it is that who the Greys are and what their mission is and why they are dealing with the humans at the level of the soul, and what their real nature is.
Well, the first thing I'd like to acknowledge is that there appear to be numerous species visiting our planet, and I think that's been well witnessed and established by some of the whistleblowers coming out overseas with stories of this kind. I'm certainly aware of a variety of species. Now, I'm also aware that some of these species are working together, and it's sort of a bit of a minefield out there, Alfred, in the contact arena, because there are people who are very fearful of their contacts. There are people who see them as transformative and positive. There are people who see them as purposeful. And I can't speak for all of those people. I can only speak what I have experienced. What I have experienced has been positive and purposeful. It's also been transformative for me some years ago when I was in a fearful state. But I have worked through that and come to understand much more about what the agenda is with the species that I have contact with. As far as souls go, I believe that souls are universal. By that I mean we can choose to incarnate into any variety of species. I don't think that we have the copyright, shall we say, on souls on this planet. Through regression with a lot of people, over the years, I have read and heard about people who have memory of being a different species in a different life in another place that isn't Earth. So I believe that our soul is a spiritual energy or entity or source that can move around and access a variety of dimensions and places and planets, and all to learn moral lessons perhaps, or to learn evolutionary lessons that are going to better the state of our soul state. In terms of what the Greys are doing with these souls, my understanding is that they cannot come and directly take over, tell us what to do on our planet. There's too much fear, there's too much misunderstanding and too much confusion and chaos on this planet at present on all levels. And one way that they can influence our evolution and our advancement and our spiritual understandings is to work with souls who are ready to incarnate, willing to incarnate on this planet as human beings at this time when our planet is in dire straits and is in need of people who have wisdom, education, and the intellectual ability to assist the evolution of the planet and the ecological state of the planet.
Have you been able to acquire any information on the origin of souls, who or what makes souls, how they are created, and how the Greys come about to have souls on their craft?
No, I have not. That's the one thing I'd really like to know more about, is how these souls have been attracted to this mission, shall we say, or to this purpose, and how they choose who they're going to incarnate into, what kind of life they're going to incarnate into. But my understanding through my experience in life as a clairvoyant, and I hesitate to use that word because it has connotations around it for many people, but it has been a natural thing for me. It's not something I acquired in later life. It was just natural for me from birth. My understanding is that we evolve through the lives that we lead, and we often incarnate into a life not just for our own evolution, but to assist maybe another soul who we are going to associate in that life, and we also assist them or a number of souls in their evolution in that life through what they learn and the role that we play in that life. And so this is akin to what is happening with these souls that are incarnating into children being born on the planet for maybe the last 30 years and being presently born on the planet.
So overall, you see the Greys, and again you're saying that there are many types, as a beneficial, supportive, and evolutionary force for humanity at this time.
Well, I can say that the Greys that I have associated with have that agenda, yes. But, I hear other stories of other people's experiences with Greys, and I can't speak for them, and I accept that other people may have other experiences, but these are my experiences.
Well, thank you. Would you like to leave just kind of a summary thought with our audience as to what you think that this experience has brought you, and what sort of you can bring to them, to us, that we should. I mean, I know that coming in contact with your story has really opened my eyes tremendously. And just some, maybe um, a, a minute or two just to some thoughts that you might have of lessons that you are acquiring in this extraordinary life that you're leading.
Well, one thing that I have always said to people, Alfred, is to keep an open mind. And it's very easy in this time when there is a lot of information coming out from a lot of sources about the extraterrestrial presence. There's a lot of theories out there, there's a lot of people making guesses, and some of this information may have truthful or factual foundation and some not. So really, it is a minefield for people out there who are searching for the truth or searching for something that resonates with them and their experiences. And I think that the sad thing in the contact field is that we have some very clear divisions of contactees, abductees, experiencers, etc. And I encourage people who have who've had a negative experience to not discount the experiences of those who've had a positive one, and vice versa. I think the only way that we can all move forward and come to a greater understanding of future open contact with extraterrestrials is to listen to each other and hear each other and take the time to consider what the other person is saying. Because I believe that no matter what our background, no matter what our experience, be it negative or positive, there are always what I call the golden threads that bind us. And those golden threads are the things that we can find that are similar, that we can agree upon, and that is always our starting point for working together, because we do have to work together.
Well, thank you so much. If members of our audience want to follow up and learn more about your work and what you're doing, how can they do so?
They can contact me through my website, which is www.ufocusnz.org.nz. My email address is on there, and I'll be happy to communicate with anyone who'd like to ask me questions or talk with me further about that. And I'm almost completed my book on my life so far of these experiences, and I hope that that will be out early next year.
Oh, well, good. Please keep us posted on the publication of your book, because we would like to have you on it as a guest, Suzanne, again then when your book is out, and review more in depth parts of what your work is and what your experience and what your direction is in this life.
Thanks, Alfred. I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good. Well,
you're welcome.
This is Alfred Lambremont Weber, and we've been with Suzanne Hansen, and we feel greatly blessed by this visit with you. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Alfred.